So I turned off the light very quickly. Everyone's shuffling and trying to pull their pants up, all this stuff. And the guy who she was blowing pushed her away, and I flipped back on the light, and I could see clearly that it was a woman.
Welcome to another episode of the Gay Barchives Show, where we explore gay history one bar at a time. I'm your host, Art Smith, and our guest today is Alphonso King Jr., but you might know him better as Jade Elektra or DJ Relentless. So, welcome, Alphonso.
Hi.
Hi, it's great to have you here. I was looking over the list of bars that you've worked at. Either, I'm guessing most of the bar experience was either as Jade Elektra or DJ Relentless. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is correct.
So, I was looking over the list of bars you sent, and you have worked at an amazing number of bars, some of which are rather iconic. And I decided today I just want to talk mostly about the bars from New York City. So we'll delve into that. I'll just throw out the name of a bar and you can talk about it a little bit, your experience there, maybe how you got hired, what was really cool about it, and so on. The first one I want to start with is probably the one that was open most recently and just closed in the past year, and that's the Hangar. So you worked at the Hangar. Tell me about that.
Shortly after they opened, I popped in and I was like, "Oh, do you need a DJ?" And they like thought about it for a couple of days. The owners were Maurice and Wayne. They were a couple at that time. And they thought about it for a couple of days, and then they called me up and they were like, "Okay." But I was thinking, oh, they're going to put in a DJ booth, and they did not. I was behind the bar with the bartenders DJing, and what a nightmare that was because I was still using vinyl. So the bartenders were constantly bumping into me while I was mixing. Oh my God, that first year was a mess. I was there for let's see, the 90, they opened in 94, and I was there until 2000.
So that's a pretty long run.
Yeah. And I used to do their Saturdays, and I did Thursday nights, and then occasionally they would have me in on like a Tuesday or something if there was a special event. Uh, but yeah, I was a resident then. I also did Sundays for a little while too. That was a big day there as well.
So, to somebody who has never set foot in the Hangar, how would you describe it? What kind of bar was it?
The hangar for me, what I okay, so you have to put in proximity, like where it was placed. So at the other end of Christopher Street was Two Potato, and that was a black gay bar. At the other end was Stonewall, the Monster, all those places. And Boots and Saddles was also there. So across the street from it was Ties, and that was kind of I called it an S&M bar. It was a stand and model place. You just went to stand and have your cocktail and drink. They never had, I don't think they had a DJ. They played music, but so right across the street was the Hangar, and the Hangar was kind of the interracial pickup joint. Like this is where, like, if you were interested in black guys or white guys or whatever, this was the place to go. And it was very narrow when you walked in, and then it opened up towards the back where the pool table was. And they had like go-go boys on the weekends. Um, but they built a little platform for them to dance on in the back because they could not dance on the bar. First of all, there was no room; it was very narrow. uh, um, but they from 90, I'd say from 95 until like 98, they had a really great staff, and all the bartenders knew everybody, and it was the place to go. It was like the Cheers of the neighborhood to me. That's what it seemed like. And I was very happy to be a part of that because I got to kind of form what the soundtrack was going to be for that as the DJ. So I did this great mix of pop stuff, but like R&B things, and it was that's where I think my main following started. Because of there was a guy named Hector Alemany who used to sell CD or sell cassettes, not CDs, on the pier, and he came to me and liked my music so much that he started commissioning me to do CDs or cassettes, which eventually turned into CDs, and he would sell them out on the pier. So the Hangar was very essential to the brand of DJ Relentless.
Very cool. Now, you made a comment in the description of the hangar that it was kind of the interracial um, melting pot of that Christopher Street strip there. Would you say that some of the other bars tended to be, I know Two Potato was predominantly black, but the rest of the bars, were they predominantly white? Is that what the issue was, or were there some that were kind of mixed in different ways?
I mean, there were the Monster had a mixed crowd, but the thing was is that it did not cater to the black patrons. Like the music was Warren Gluck was I loved Warren and he was a great person and helped me a lot in my career, but his music was very the Saint, like that's the that was his era, and so that's he played like he was playing for the Saint. Even if it was current stuff, it still had that kind of sound to it. And so by the time I was the person that replaced him at the Monster, I started filling in for him, and I also broke the color line. They had never had a black DJ there ever. And he, when the original owner died, his lover took over Charlie, and Charlie and Warren did not get along, and they fought constantly. And Warren was getting bookings out of the country and around, around the U.S., but also out of the country. And so he was gone a lot, and Charlie hated that. So they got into it one night, and I got a phone call on a Thursday evening. I'll never forget it. I was watching, I think, Friends, and the owner was like, how soon can you get here? And I was like, I don't know. I have to get on the subway. He's like, no, take a cab. I'll pay for it. And I watched Warren carry his stuff out. And he turned to me and he said, good luck and watch yourself around this one. And he was right. He was very right because Charlie was a mess. The first few weeks, it was great. And everything was great. And I went in and I interjected like some more R&B stuff into their thing. Like Crazy in Love was real big back then. And then all of a sudden it turned into this thing of we're getting too many black customers or the way that it was worded was you're bringing in the wrong element. And it just grew from there. And then I got fired because of I played something that had a rap in it.
Wow.
Yeah. Meanwhile, their Latin DJ on Mondays was playing hip hop all the time with the Latin stuff that he was playing. So it was definitely a racial thing that was going on. Then the Splash had an incident with the drag queen Shaquita. She showed up and they decided that they didn't want her in, and they told her she couldn't come in because she had on high heels. So then she reached in her bag and pulled out some sneakers, and they still wouldn't let her in, and that was a big thing. Like I think they wrote about it in HX, which was the gay mag back then. Yeah, it was. There were places that black folks were welcomed, and there were other places they weren't, and so that's why Two Potato became a major black spot because of this was their spot to hang out and not the music was catered to them, the bartenders and everyone knew everyone. So yeah, and I've always had this weird thing where I know how to spin for almost any crowd. I've worked in country and western bars, strip bars, all kinds of places. So I can fit in anywhere. And when I worked at Two Potato, a lot of them really didn't like the fact that I worked at a lot of other white bars. And they considered me to be a sellout, and that has been a thing that's followed me throughout my entire career as a DJ.
So you just can't win. In one situation, like when you went to the Monster, you were breaking a glass ceiling. You were the first black DJ they hired, and that was a big deal. And then you're getting flack from the black community for playing at places that were known to be white hangouts or playing white style music or whatever the case may be.
Yeah,
So you were getting it from both sides, basically.
yeah, it's always been the case. When we get to the Tampa days, that I'll tell you a lot more about that.
Now, Two Potato, I learned about Two Potato a couple of years ago through almost happenstance. So I was having a conversation. I don't know if you know her, the woman that owns Julia's, Helen Buford.
I don't know her, but I know Julius. Yeah,
Okay,
the
so the woman
burgers
who
there
now
are
owns
amazing.
Julia's, um, she and her husband had owned several gay bars over the decades. And he passed away some time ago, and she inherited what was, the remaining bar. I think Julius was the only bar he owned at that time. But she was telling me about some of the other bars that he used to own, and one of them was called the Bike Stop, which I did not know there was a bike stop in New York, but I found information about it since then. And the other one was Two Potato. So
Really?
apparently, the woman who owns Julius now, her husband years back owned Two Potato.
Wow. Wow. I'm trying to remember. There was someone who worked the door, and I want to say his name was JP or something. I have to look him up. He's somewhere on one of my friends lists on Facebook because not unfortunately, I have like three different pages because of I call it the witness protection plan. Uh, so, but I he was the only person that I knew who was in charge. So I never met the owner. Every time I had to deal with him when I DJ'd there or whatever, I dealt with him. And so I never met who was the owner or whatever.
Now, you mentioned that Two Potato was predominantly focused on the black market.
Yes. Yeah. And then came Chi Chi's, which was right next to the New Jersey subway over to New Jersey. This was the
Yeah.
very last stop. But there was a bar right next to it called Chi Chi's, and I worked there as well, and also hosted a talent show there.
So how would you compare the experience of working at a bar like Two Potato versus Hangar? Was one vastly different than the other, or I mean, I know you ran into some trouble at Monster after being there a short period of time, but how would they were they completely different experiences, or were they fairly similar?
Yeah, they were because of it was like everything that was programmed into it was about the Black gay experience. There used to be a bar that was on the West Side Highway called Keller's, and that was the other black bar, but they didn't have a DJ. They just had like they played music or had a jukebox or whatever. So, and then let's see, around that corner was what was that place? I think it was called Badlands.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you start moving up Christopher, and the next spot would have been Two Potato, and it was a really tiny place. Like literally, the stage seemed like it took up more space than the than the space it was for the customers, but it would get packed. And how I got drawn in was Harmonica Sunbeam was one of the headliners there. She great comedian, drag queen, and she I she had a DJ named Ken Terry who used to do her mixes for her and do her announcements for her intros. But I don't know what the situation was, but she decided that she needed someone new, and she started working with me, and I was always available and whatever. So she helped me. She brought me in as her DJ there, and then the owner of Escuelita saw what a draw she was there and came and invited us. I'll never forget this. He invited us on a Sunday night to come over to Escuelita, and Kevin Aviance was the Sunday night show. And we walked in, and there were about 25 people in the audience. And Kevin came out, and I love Kevin, but Kevin can be a handful sometimes. And back then, he was heavily, heavily into drugs. So he came out and he did the entire MacArthur Park suite, all 17 minutes of it. By the time he got to One of a Kind, and I don't know if you know the suite, but it's MacArthur Park, One of a Kind, Heaven Knows, and then back to MacArthur Park. By the time he got to One of a Kind, several people had gotten up and left. By the time he got to Heaven Knows, there was probably about five of us still sitting there. And he got fired that night. And we got invited into the office, and Ben offered harmonica the Sunday nights. And so that's how we ended up over at Escuelita. And we built from there. And that was the longest running tea dance. It ran for like 17 years. Other than the Monster. The Monster still has their Sunday tea dance, but like for people of color, that was the longest one that ever happened. Longer than Body and Soul, longer than like it was. I We are a part of New York's history for people of color, like the Latino and Black community. If you mention Harmonica Sunbeam, DJ Relentless, they know. And Sugar Pie, who was our security, she was part of the show, but she pretended that she was security. We built quite a night there, and it was great. I miss those days a lot.
I hear that a lot. I've been doing this project for about 5 years, and I've spoken to hundreds and hundreds of people about their gay bar memories. There's over 150 hours of video interviews on my YouTube channel about gay bar memories. But in addition to that, I've had in-person conversations with countless other people. And that's a common theme is I miss those days. I miss the good old days. I miss the pre-grinder days. I want to connect with people, not with, JPEGs. So it's kind of a common thread. Now you mentioned Escuelita, and I've been familiar with that bar for a while as well. That was conceived originally as a bar predominantly for Latinos, right? It was designed
Correct.
for the Latino community.
When I worked at Sally's, Escuelita, it was the entrance was on 8th Avenue back then. And when you walked into it, you went down the stairs to get into it, and it looked I I forgot what the word is, but it looked like a Spanish horror house is what it looked like. It was all red velvet things all over the walls, and
Bordello.
yeah, that's the word. And they were known for their drag shows. They had Kateria was the hostess, and then came Angel Sheridan, who's actually from Florida, because I knew her back when she was in Florida. Uh, oh man, it was quite the place. And I like to me when I first got there, because I was working at Sally's, and Sally's was kind of run down. That was the high class place to be. It was Escuelita. I didn't get. I went there a couple of times when I worked at Sally's, but Sally, who owned Sally's, did not like you going to other establishments. There used to be, oh, I cannot remember the name of the place, but in the bus terminal at the back of it, where the buses exited, there used to be a little bar that Sally's owned, and it was the after hours. So you would go and you knocked, and if the doorman didn't recognize you, you didn't get in. So, and they would be open until like 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, and people would just be in there drinking, and music would be playing. They never had shows or anything. It was a hustler bar, and so there were tons of boys hanging out trying to make a buck. Yeah. And so Sally's was the place for the trans girls to hook, and this was the place for the boys. Oh, and around the corner from that on 42nd was LaFleur's, and that was the competition for Sally's. and they were at what Sally's and LaFleur, John LaFleur, I think was his name. They did not like each other. They were constantly saying bad things about each other. But this is before the internet, so it would be word of mouth. So they would say something to someone so it could get back to the other.
Yeah, there were some pretty contentious times back then. I've heard so many stories about rivalries between bar owners and nefarious actions, things that they've done to undermine the other bar, or calling the police to close down another bar, and in some cases, even arson or some other crime being committed at a bar by or inspired by another bar owner. Not only in New York, but in other cities, Atlanta, Chicago. There's numerous cases where some of these bar owners really took it personally and went after their competition like they were, some kind of gangsters or something. It was kind of a crazy situation.
Wow.
So, but it's interesting to hear some stories about some of the lesser known bars in New York, because so many people talk about, Splash and Studio 54 and Palladium and all these big gigantic bars that everybody on the planet knows about because they were so big that they were in the news all the time. And it's refreshing to find out about some of these little kind of neighborhood bars and niche bars. Monster has a particularly long success with being not only in the Village, but they also had a location in Key West, and I think they had one
On
on
Fire
Fire
Island, didn't it?
Island, which I
Yeah.
think is about to. Is the Fire Island one going to reopen or?
I haven't kept up with any of that since I left New York. My dealings with Charlie after I got fired, I was just like, I don't want anything to do with this place anymore or whatever. And ironically, he kind of turned the bar over to some other company or something. And now there's black DJs, there's all kinds of stuff there's hip hop nights there, there's all that stuff. And I'm just like, wow, I got fired for playing a song that had a Beyonce song that had a rap in it.
Hey, you broke the barrier for these people. They should all be sending you tributes. They should
And no one's going
a
to
few
ever
dollars a
remember
month coming into your Cash App for that.
that.
From each one of them.
Yeah, no, that's not going to happen, I'm sure. I'm just
I'm
a
quite
footnote.
sure it's not either. So one of the bars that I've talked about with a number of people over the years that I've been doing these interviews, and you also mentioned that you worked there, was Stonewall. When did
Yes.
you work at Stonewall?
The first time that I worked at Stonewall was I was a DJ there, and it was 90, let's see, whatever the year was that it was the first, I guess the 25th anniversary of Stonewall.
94.
Yes. Okay. So that's when I started there. We actually the next year is when they started talking about making it a landmark, and we went to court. So this is the time period when Giuliani was closing down a lot of gay bars, and he was using the cabaret license to do it. So if there was any dancing in your place, they could shut you down. You would get a warning first, but then like the next time they caught you, they would shut you down. And Stonewall decided that whoever was running it at that moment decided that they wanted to get a cabaret license. So we had to go to court to apply for it. And I testified as a DJ saying that this is an important part of our culture and an important part of our history. And, it got rated with people dancing in it. We need to fix that. So yeah, we got the cabaret license, and I just remember like being able to freely play the music and program. The interesting thing about working at the Hangar though was because there wasn't any dancing. Like, okay, Two Potato, they didn't give a damn. The customers there would dance if they felt like dancing, but at the Hangar, they would stop you. The security would come up to you and say, "No, you can't dance in here." And I had to learn how to play for a room that couldn't dance. And that was a really hard lesson, but it helped me. It's helped me so much later, especially in corporate gigs. So like when I do like corporate gigs and they hire me for something, I know exactly how to play to give them enough energy to make them want to dance. But if they're not going to dance, I can still keep the energy going. The Hangar taught me that. So it was great to actually finally be able to play for a dance floor and just let loose on whatever my programming was, and whatever I was looking at on the floor, I could play for that, and it was great. So,
So a couple of months ago, I interviewed Bob Gurecki. Um,
oh, the, he worked at Two Potato, didn't he?
no, he was one of the owners ultimately of Stonewall, and he was kind of a general manager under the owner when you worked there, which was Jimmy Paisano.
Okay,
Jimmy
yeah,
passed
yeah.
away a few years after, I think it was in '97 or '98. Jimmy passed away, and Bob inherited a good portion of his ownership in the bar. So Bob was there from day one when it opened as New Jimmy's at Stonewall Place, and then
Oh,
the
wow.
next year changed the name back to Stonewall. And he was
Ah,
there until when they sold to the current owners, I think, some, I don't know, 10, 15 years later. So Bob tells a story about the cabaret license. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but it was interesting to me. So when they moved into the Stonewall space in 1990, there was no remnants of the original Stonewall in the building. It was
except, well, I thought there's a small little section towards the back on the bottom floor, I thought was part of the original.
I don't think so. From what Bob says, it had been a bagel shop and a Chinese restaurant and several other things because Stonewall originally closed in 1969 and did not reopen until 1990 as a bar. So in between there, all the
Oh,
other
wow.
places that came in, you know, reconfigured and redecorated and whatever. But what Bob told me that was interesting is that when they went for the cabaret license, they were at first turned down because they were too close to residential property. They were within 500 feet. So they decided to blow out the back wall and move the entrance to the opposite side of the building. So when they got their cabaret license, apparently they had an entrance on the other side of the building, not on Christopher Street.
Yeah, it was on Seventh Avenue.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
that's why. That's why they put the entrance there was because that entrance was more than 500 feet from a residential property. So they could then get a cabaret license, and they did. Um,
Oh, I had no idea about. Well, I remember the entrance, and I was just like, oh, okay, we're expanding. That's all I thought,
Yeah,
you
he
know.
said there was like a little boutique or store or something there that went out of business, and they took over the space and blew out the wall between that and the stone wall on Christopher Street, and then went out to Seventh Avenue with an entrance so they could bypass the law a little bit.
I'm trying to remember. I also worked for, oh, so in the trans world, I worked at Edelweiss, and after Edelweiss closed, it was on like, I want to say 10th and 43rd, or yeah, 10th and 43rd, because it was down the street way at the end. Um, After that closed, he opened a spot that was on 7th Avenue. The reason why I'm thinking of the entrance, because of just on the next block, in the middle of the block, he opened another trans place, and I cannot remember the name of it, and I'm so sorry. But I DJ'd there for a couple of times, but I was like, I don't want to get back into this scene. So so I left it. But yeah, when I lived in New York, I I was trying to survive. So any gig that came along, I would take it. So I worked almost everything that anyone asked me to do. I jumped in. And I remember they created a DJ booth for me when I went to Jay's. You know about Jay's Hangout?
I do not.
Okay, so in your group, I told a story about catching a female dressed as a male, um, giving blowjobs at this after hours jerk off club. That was Jay's Hangout, and it was at 14th and 9th. And it's in a triangular building. Actually, it's kind of famous only because of on the top floor, Madonna shot her video for Love Don't Live Here Anymore. And below us was Hellfire, which was this leather club. It was leather and torture. Like you could hear them like torturing people from the wall on the other side because of when you came into the building, you came into like this triangular building and the bar was here. You checked your coats. Then there was a little dance floor and they made a DJ booth there, but then there were still stairs that went down, and that's where the jerk off sessions happened. So before I could become the DJ, I became sex police. So you used to have to walk around with a flashlight and go downstairs and make sure that they weren't actually having sex. You could jerk off, but you couldn't do anything else. And that's and the trick was you go downstairs, you flip on the lights, everybody's, you know, doing whatever they're going to do, but that's legal to do. But you walk out of the room and act like you've gone back upstairs, but don't go upstairs. Go back into the middle of the room and just stand there because it's pitch black. So I flip on the light and there is there's someone that I had seen many times and I thought, gosh, that guy's really cute. Why is he here? Because most of the guys were older men who were there, and some of them I was like, oh, you really like this is your only sexual outlet. So I'm looking in this person that I thought was a guy was given this blowjob, and so busy doing it, they had their eyes closed, and I happened to catch with the light their hand in their crotch, but there was nothing there, and I was like, oh my god. So I turned off the light very quickly. Everyone's shuffling and trying to pull their pants up, all this stuff. And the guy who she was blowing pushed her away. And I flipped back on the light and I could see clearly that it was a woman. And she begged me, she's like, please do not tell them I've been coming here for a while, blah, blah. And I didn't tell on her, but I told her on my nights, I can't have you here. So, but yeah.
It's just crazy what goes on in some of those bars and what we used to accept or expect from some of these spaces. These days things are a little bit different, and that would be kind of really out on the edge. You wouldn't see too many places that have that acceptance of any type of sexual activity or nudity in the bars for the most part. But back then, yeah, it was, everybody expected, especially in big cities like New York, there were half a dozen places where that were specifically designed for that kind of interaction. And
Yeah.
it's something that the people that are coming out now, that have come out in the last 5 or 10 years, probably have never experienced on that level. But it was really kind of an interesting element of the gay world. And you've obviously been involved over your career in a variety of different types of bars. I mean, you've been in bars that were designed for Hispanic community, for the Black community, for the white community, that were dance clubs, that were neighborhood bars, that were the whole genre of bars that are out there pretty much. Now, one that you did mention that you have some stories about is one that was also mentioned by another guy that I interviewed a couple weeks ago, and he talks about the works.
Yes, that's where I got my video training from, was the works. I that was the main reason I wanted to work there, was because I just love music video. I skipped school the day that MTV launched. Me and my friends went to someone's house and sat and watched MTV all day the day that that happened, because of I've just been enthralled with music videos. And so I took the job and I knew nothing about video mixing. And the owner, um, gosh, I'm trying to remember. I won't, not Adam. Oh gosh, he would kill me if he knew that I've forgotten his name, but it's been so long and I've worked so many places. But he brought me in to be a game changer. All their DJs there were white. And so there was no kind of like R&B or any of that kind of stuff being played. And the owner, Dan, no, the manager, the main manager, Dan, hated me, hated me, and did not want me there and was trying to get me fired every turn. And at one point, he accused me of stealing their library. So they would search my bag every time I left to make sure that I didn't have the bars. Like they'd subscribe to Rock America and Telegenics, those video services,
Right.
and ETV. Yeah, so he was accusing me of stealing, and they never found anything. I was actually bringing videos in from home, and then they made a rule that I couldn't do that, and that was Dan's doing. Um, but they also owned the break, which was in Chelsea. So I got to work in both, and Dan mainly worked up at the works. So they eventually transferred me down to the break, which led to me ending up working at Barracuda when it opened. So yeah, it was there was a lot of there was a lot of stuff that went on back then that had a lot to do with my race. But you know, I weathered the storm and I did what I had to do because when you're in New York, you need to work. So you deal with whatever you have to deal with so you can get that money to pay your rent and the bills and everything.
I
So
understand. And
yeah.
fortunately, you were there at a time where there were a couple of people that were breaking some barriers on a global level. Around the same time we're talking about, you had RuPaul, who was in everybody's household all of a sudden. And I remember RuPaul from my days living in Atlanta in the 80s, when RuPaul was just a tall, skinny black kid wearing Daisy Duke shorts and a cut-off T-shirt, dancing as a go-go boy on a box. I mean, he was nobody except in his own mind.
Yeah.
And he would literally handwrite posters and then photocopy them at like Kinko's or something and staple them to the telephone poles around Midtown that would say, tonight at 2 a.m. at weekends, world famous RuPaul. And there was nothing world famous about him except in his head, but it worked. And
Well,
obviously,
yeah, I call it the Grace Jones effect. Grace Jones is an amazing performer and a personality or whatever. But if you were actually to see her without makeup and without the whole,
right.
put together, you wouldn't think twice about watching her do anything. But she has the attitude, she has the energy and everything of I am someone and I am a star, and that's what you got to put out there. As far as me and drag, I always think if I had that kind of drive, I probably would have. I came up the same time as Rue. I recorded records shortly after she came out. Uh, but I'm not one of those, like back then, you had to be a larger than life person in the scene in order for people to pay attention. And I'm not that. I'm kind of mellow compared to most. But I mean, I think I have talent and I sing and all this stuff, but like, I'm not a Rue or a Lady Bunny or any of those people. And I have I'm really good friends with Lady Bunny. I'm not really good friends with Rue at all. We've butted heads several times, and it has to do with one of her songs. "Looking Good, Feeling Gorgeous" is a ripoff of one of my songs.
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah. And there's nothing really I can do about it because the person that I was working with, one of the Midnight Society, Curtis Atchison, leaked my track. So it got out to California before we could get it signed. And yeah, it's a whole mess.
So the Alfonso that we're talking to right now, how does
Mm-hmm.
he differ from DJ Relentless or from Jade Elektra? Is there a big personality change when you put on a different cap and become one or the other?
I would say, I mean, DJ Relentless isn't that much different from me because I'm a music nerd, so that's really what he's born out of. But I've had to assert myself a little more as DJ Relentless. Like I've had to stand up for myself a lot more as DJ Relentless. So that's the reason why I sort of kind of consider him to be a persona. But as far as Jade Elektra, I think Jessie Volt puts it the best because we used to share a dressing room. She would say, while we were doing our makeup, she'd go, "Oh, there she is. You just crossed over. You're no longer Alfonso. And it's I don't know. I have an idea in my head, sort of kind of like what Rue might have did back then, of who Jade is, and she's a combination of my mom, my grandmother. At one point, most people won't believe this, but I was engaged to a girl, and the girl that I was engaged to, her name was Tracy. She is all of those women kind of put into one thing, and she's I try to make her classy. She's not vulgar. She's not, and that's probably why I don't stand out, is because I don't attack the audience. I'm not going to say something really, really outrageous. Where I do say things outrageous is in my recordings, because of I became known for bitch tracks, and bitch tracks are part of the ballroom scene. So where I get out my aggression as Jade is in those tracks. I say whatever it is that I really want to say, but I don't particularly name names. I just kind of the person who it's about, when they hear it, they know that it's about them, but that's it.
So if you were doing an introduction at, say, an awards banquet or a big festival, if you were introducing Jade Elektra, how would you introduce Jade to the audience?
My favorite intro for me is the girl with something extra, Jade Elektra. um, but like, my since I've come to Toronto, that's all changed because of I'm more of an advocate for the HIV positive community now. So now I have a huge following as that. So there's tons of things that people say about me when they introduce me, because of I've done a lot of work here. Uh, um, Moving to Toronto has given me the opportunity to work on the things that I've always wanted to work on, but didn't have the time to do in New York City, because I was constantly where I was working almost 7 days a week at certain points. And you got to do that if you're going to survive and actually, you know, have a place and maybe get away for a vacation every now and again or something. Uh, so yeah, but yeah, I guess I would describe myself. I've I have aspirations of being a jazz singer, so I would talk probably about being a vocalist and about my early beginnings. How I became a DJ is I became an assistant to my uncle Herb, or Herb King, who had a radio show at WMNF 88.5. I don't even know if that's still a radio station in Tampa, but he had a jazz and R&B show on Mondays, but he was blind, so he needed an assistant to get the records for him, and that's how my DJ thing started, was working with him.
Very cool. And did Jade kind of evolve out of the DJ thing? Were you already
Uh,
working in the clubs and somehow decided you needed a drag persona as well?
no, when I was in Tampa, I my first drag name was Ebony. And there used to be a bar called Renee's, and they had a Monday night talent show. So I used to go and enter, and um, I was terrible the very first show. And there was a hostess named Tony Rose who took me under her wing, and uh, she gave me my first Millie Jackson record, and that's how I connected with the audience, and they really loved me for doing that. And I was the only one doing things that had monologues to it. So I would really learn the material, because most songs they repeat themselves or whatever, and everyone was doing Whitney Houston and Stephanie Mills and all that stuff. So I was doing something completely different, and that became my signature. Uh, and when I moved to New York, there was an Ebony Jet, and I was like, oh, well, I can't use that name here. And also, I wasn't planning on doing drag in New York. Um, but the person that took me in, Grace, the electrifying Grace, who was one of the hosts at Sally's, and she also used to be, oh gosh, there was another bar, a black bar in Midtown that she was a hostess at before I came to New York. But anyway, she was known for that. She got very sick, and we needed to do a benefit. And I happened to mention Oh, Sally's had Dorian Corey and Angie Extravaganza both hosted nights there, and those are two people featured in Paris is Burning. Upstairs from where I was living with Grace was Paris Dupree. I used to watch her place when she would go do her balls in Philly. Um, and so we did this benefit, and I mentioned to Dorian Corey that, oh, I used to do drag in Florida. And she was like, oh, well, you need to do it again, darling. And I was like, oh, I don't have any clothes. So she made my early outfits, which actually have quite a few of them still. And maybe one day they'll be in the Smithsonian or something. But that's how I started doing drag in New York. But in Florida, I was ebony for a long time. And I only had one outfit at the beginning. So the crowd was really rough at Renee's. And they gave me the nickname Ebony Fashions, which was to read me for not having more than one outfit. But eventually, when I started winning, I started getting more clothes or whatever. And the name stuck. Ebony Fashions was because I had really nice clothes at that point. But Jade Elektra came about because of I needed to come up with a name for this benefit. And I wasn't going to call myself the electrifying Jade, even though Grace would have been considered my drag mother at that moment because that's who I was living with. So I decided to make it Jade Elektra instead.
Very cool. You mentioned Renee's, and I actually know several people who were involved there, and I've interviewed one or two of them. Bob Taylor, uh,
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm.
he's still around and kicking here in Florida, and we kind of chat on Facebook every now and again. Um, I knew Tiffany Middlesex for many years. Um,
Yeah, she was my neighbor for a long time, and her and my adopted brother were really close friends. They used to go to the movies together all the time.
I've been talking to Tiffany about interviewing, it was actually Gerald, but about interviewing Gerald to get some of his memories. And he said, well, I'm not really feeling well. And I'd kind of like to get over this a little bit. Can we put it off a couple months? And we did. And unfortunately, he passed away. So
Yeah.
we never captured that interview. But I have very, very many memories of times with Tiffany in different parts of Tampa and different clubs. Tiffany was an incredible performer. I always envision in my head when I think of Tiffany, I kind of see this image of like Tina Turner or somebody just doing this handshaking thing and this almost having a seizure on stage because she was so into the energy of the music and the performance. It was pretty incredible. Um,
Yeah.
but Tampa had a lot of well-known performers here and a lot of famous clubs. For a while, Tampa was the spot for nightlife in Central Florida. I mean, you had, the El Goya, which became Trax, which became Pleasure Dome. Um, you had Renee's. You had all these clubs that were just dynamic. Um,
Did you know about Paradise?
Name sounds familiar, but I've
It was in North Tampa, like up on North Fowler. I was a DJ there. I was one of the residents there. And it was a redneck lesbian bar, basically. But I mean, gay men came there. They had line dancing, all this stuff. They had barbecues every Sunday. Yeah.
my head gets a little confused because over the course of the 5 years or so, I have researched tons of bars and I've digitally reconstructed the logos for more than 4,000 gay bars.
Wow.
So sometimes when people say something like Paradise, in my head, I'm seeing, Paradise Garage, Paradise in Atlantic City, Paradise, and I'm trying to like run through the images in my head to see which one might be the Tampa one. Because you have so many of them in there. And I actually put together a slideshow last February for the Stonewall National Museum for their gala that had 3,000 gay bar logos in a
Wow.
slideshow that each one is on the screen for 2 seconds. And it takes an hour and 46 minutes to watch it. That's how many
Oh my
logos there are.
God.
And they're only up for 2 seconds a piece. And I have since then, that was about 3,000. Um, I'm right at 4,000 now for that slideshow. And hopefully by October for LGBT History Month, I hope to have it up to 5,000, which will be like a 3-hour video. But it's it's amazing how much history there is out there, and that's why I like capturing these stories, firsthand experiences, so people down the road can watch these interviews, they can look at them, they can learn about the bars that came before, they can have some concept of the history that was never recorded because there were not a lot of people. I mean, I know in your environment in the village, you had Linda Simpson there taking a lot of Polaroid pictures. I've interviewed her as well. Um, and there are a handful of people in the club kid scene from Limelight and the Tunnel and all that. You had Michael Fazakerly, who was taking tons of pictures, and Walt Paper, both of whom documented a lot of those scenes. But by and large, the lesser known bars, there's not a lot of history out there recording what they were, where they were, what they were like. And that's why it's so energizing to me to meet people from all these different walks of life. And I've interviewed club owners, I've interviewed celebrities, I've interviewed patrons, bartenders. It doesn't matter to me. Everybody's story is important. And
That,
it's all part of our history, and we need to document it and record it. So I am so glad that we had the time to kind of catch up with you. Now, anybody that's interested in finding out more about you, first of all, you have a CD out. The CD is called Relentlessly Cunty.
okay, yeah, that's no longer available. Like actually, it's so funny. Someone just wrote me the other day because of their copies are messed up from being burnt CDs from way back when. So they were like, "Do you still have them?" And I'm gonna have to dig them up and make new copies for them. That came about. There used to be a record store in the village on Bleecker Street called Rebel Rebel. And the owner there, I used to shop there all the time. The owner was like, people keep coming in and asking about cunty beats and bitch tracks, and I don't know what that is. And I was like, oh, well, I'll make you a CD and so you can understand what it is. Well, he was playing it in the store. His name was David. And someone came in and was like, where can I get this? And so that's how the series started. I did 5 of them then, and then after I moved here, I did the 6th one. But it is considered to be. I mean, I've been told it's considered to be the Bible of bitch tracks and ballroom music, because a lot of those labels don't exist anymore, and some of them were bootlegs. Some of them were things that I made myself. So that series no longer exists. I have records out as Jade Elektra, and I have like I just last year for the first time I actually have all the rights to all my early tracks. So we did an album called Legendary Darling, and that's available for streaming everywhere. Spotify, it's on Apple Music, and that's kind of a little slice of early New York history as well, because there was so many artists that came along during that period, and I'm interested in trying to gather up a lot of the people who made that music back then and do a documentary about that so they can have their day and people can understand where all this stuff comes from. Because unfortunately, I know everyone wants to attribute everything to RuPaul, but RuPaul has made a career out of stealing stuff from Paris is Burning and all these other things.
Yes, there
It,
was life before RuPaul.
yeah, yeah, but
Gay
they're
life, drag life, club life, everything. It was all there before RuPaul.
yeah, but unfortunately, a lot of these kids they think that she's the beginning and end of all of it, and I'm here to tell you no.
Yeah, and you're not the only one. There's plenty of people out there singing that same song. Um, but if somebody wants to find out more about you, at the end of the video, I'm going to go ahead and put up some credits for people to find you. Is there a website that they can go to that'll kind of direct them to the world of Alphonso / Relentless / Jade?
I don't really have. If you Google me, you can find me. I'm on Facebook. I'm on all of the platforms, so you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, all of that stuff as DJ Relentless and Jade Elektra. I have a Wikipedia page but nobody goes to that. Uh, yeah, I mean, all you have to do is Google me. A lot of stuff come up if you type in Jade Elektra, and that's Jade Elektra with a K, not with a C, and DJ Relentless. That those you can find me very easily.
Well, very cool. And if they really want to stalk you, they can just head up to Toronto and go to the Well because you're now connected to that family of bars. I think there's what, seven of them in Ontario
Yeah, but I don't
and
know how many.
one in Florida.
Yeah. He's opening up a lot of stuff everywhere.
So you need to
So
convince John Ripson is the owner of the Well. You need to convince him to put you on a plane and send you down to Fort Lauderdale so you can do a special event at the Well on Wilton Drive in Wilton Manors. Because that is
I would love.
you will die when you get there. Have you been to Wilton Manors?
I've never been to one Wilton
Okay,
Manors.
Wilton Manors is a tiny little city. It's about the size of Ybor City, the whole town. It has
Wow.
an actual mayor of its own. It's 2 square miles in size. The main drag is about a mile long, and there are 26 gay liquor licenses on that drive.
Holy crap.
And when they have a party, 30, 40, 50,000 people pile in the streets, almost all gay. They even have a trans stripper bar at the center of the drive.
Wow.
So it's everything you could want and more. You can be as gay as you want, and nobody cares. So you should, and it's warm. It's in Fort Lauderdale, just the north edge of Fort Lauderdale. You couldn't ask for anything, more pleasurable. So in the middle of the winter, Thanksgiving or something, you want to get out of town. You say, "Hey, John, I heard you got a place down in Florida. Let me go down there and introduce a new audience to the Well."
Yeah, well, that would be great. That would be great.
I'll put in a good
I
word when I talk to him.
well, please do. When I met him on Pride Day, I said, "Oh, I hear it's like trying to meet the Pope to have a meeting with you," and he laughed because of his managers will not let you. They don't let you talk to him directly. You can only talk through the managers to him. So I was very blessed that he was actually there that day to actually witness what it is that I do. Because I've been trying really hard to bring back video mixing to the scene because you know, that was a huge thing in New York when I worked at the Works in the break. And it was really people came in, they had their cocktails and they were glued to the screens, because they couldn't dance. So uh, that was another form of entertainment. And you would throw in a couple of comedy clips, something from Kids in the Hall, the Buddy Cole skits, all of that kind of stuff. And it was entertainment, but it was gay entertainment. And
Right.
yeah, and I wish that we could do that again. And so, but unfortunately, today's kids, their attention spans are very short. So everything has to be very, very quick, and you have to get it in and get it out very quickly. And but I'm up for the task.
Well, you've bent with the wind and over numerous decades, learning new talents and tweaking your whole vibe about how you do your DJing and how you do your drag. I am sure it will be no contest to do it again, and that we'll be seeing a new and kind of revised version of DJ Relentless and Jade Elektra in the coming years.
I hope so. I hope so. I really hope I get to do a jazz album one day because that would be great. My favorite singer is Billie Holiday, so.
Well, good luck. We hope it happens for you. And thanks so much for taking the time to talk about some of these bars and share some of your experiences. And we look forward to the next time when we can hit another city that you've worked in and have some stories to tell about. So thank you so
Sure.
much, Alfonso.
Thank you very much for having me. Bye bye.